Institute for Faith and Freedom at Grove City College presents Liberty Mail with the Student Fellows of Faith and Freedom.
Welcome to Liberty Mail with Aaron Jenks.
And Grace Riley.
Oh, that's good. We got Grace coming on to the year. New addition. Libby graduated, and so we're excited about 2022 and this fall semester at Grove City College working for the Institute for Faith and Freedom. We have a lot of new things coming up, and just starting off with the Institute for Faith and Freedom, we have an upcoming event. The title of the event is Critical Race Theory and Biblical Unity. We have a special guest speaker, Monique Dusan, coming. She will be talking on a panel discussion with Dr. Paul Kangor and Dr. Carl Trueman. And during this whole thing, they're going to be getting to the root discussion of why CRT is not the answer right now in a Christian-informed world, and getting into why that shouldn't be used in the church, nor should it be used in education. And so I wanted to give you guys a little update about Monique Dusan. Monique is a racial unity advocate and co-founder of the Center for Biblical Unity. She has a background in social services and children ministries. She has worked with a diverse array of underserved communities. She's worked as a missionary in South Africa for 4 years and serving teachers and children that were impacted by drugs, violence, and lots of trauma situations over there. She spent 2 decades advocating for critical race theory, but now she has since recanted those views, and through a series of events and personal events that I'm sure she'll give light to during this discussion, she began to see clearly. Her website says that there's contradictions of CRT within a historic Christian worldview and her current worldview. And so now she actively speaks against the use of CRT within the church and within education. So we're very excited to have Monique Dusan come to Grove City campus. This is coming up September 27th. And for Grove City students and for anyone in the local community, it'll be in Kettler Auditorium.
Yeah, and I think that will be a really interesting event, and it will be really interesting to hear her perspective as coming from someone who was kind of a woke advocate before and was in support of CRT, but she did kind of change her mind, and now she's supporting the fact that it doesn't coexist well with biblical beliefs and with her Christian worldview. So I think here at Grove City College, it'll be a really good discussion with Dr. Kangor's expertise as well, with Marxism and other things, as well as Dr. Carl Trueman's expertise. And I think it will be a really interesting and important discussion with everything going on in the news now with CRT and just how prevalent that's become in American education, because we're seeing it all over the country now. CRT is in a lot of universities. So I think having the conversation about it, what it is, and trying to break down and understand why it doesn't necessarily align with a Christian worldview is really important.
And what a great opportunity for Grove City to tackle good conversations and hard topics. And so we have an example of a classic liberal college where we will not shun away from certain ideas. And then who better than an ex-advocate to come in who understands it probably more than anyone right now.
Absolutely.
On Grove City campus, and then give light to what is hurtful about it and how it is not the avenue to take.
Yeah, and she has a lot of great points, and I think she's going to be really wonderful to have on campus and speak on this topic.
Mm-hmm. And so now switching away from that event, obviously, we have Grace Riley is new to the podcast, and we're very excited, the Institute for Faith and Freedom, to have her here. And myself, we have perfect filler from Libby Krieger that was previously on, and we're excited about the whole year because we're going to switch things up a little bit. It's not going to be typical wins of the week. It's going to be less kind of news, and we want it to be more educational. We want listeners to come away from this discussion thinking, almost like scratching your head.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are going to miss Libby a lot, but I'm very thankful to be here and very excited to be joining you, Aaron, on this podcast going forward. And we definitely are going to have a lot of really exciting episodes on a lot of interesting topics coming up. We're excited to break down some things that conservatives aren't really talking about that they should be talking about. And we're excited to dive into more educational topics and provide some conservative Christian analysis on those. So we're really excited about a great new season of Liberty Mail and a lot of really cool things to look forward to.
Yeah, we all ultimately believe that we're going to sharpen the conservative stance in the public eye. Mm-hmm. And even going a step further, I know I always use this example is that I want my either moderate friends or liberal friends to be able to listen to this conversation and be like, wow, okay, well, how do I rethink my position? And okay, you do make a lot of good points, and let's just have an open dialogue on political issues, cultural issues, and it comes to it, why our faith is informing these.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to break that down and talk about, well, what does our faith defend? Why is our faith in the center of these political issues? And why are we conservative, and what does it mean to be conservative, especially nowadays when it seems there's so much confusion about that, not only in the current political sphere, but just among conservatives in general. So we really do have the goal of breaking that down and, sharpening the conservative mind and talking a lot about the heart of conservatism and how that relates to the very real issues and things that are going on every day in current events.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think we'd be doing you, the viewer or listener, any justice without, before starting any episode, without diving into who Grace and myself are a little bit and just kind of warming you up to what we did this summer maybe. And then, so please, Grace, if you can tell us a little about yourself and how this podcast is going to be used in your experience and how what you've done in the past has led to now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started in politics a few years ago, back in high school. I was very interested in just current events and what was going on in our country. And I had always, I joke when I was younger, I had always liked sitting at the adult table when I was a kid. I always liked talking about important things, even when I didn't really understand what they meant necessarily. But growing up and diving into some of these important topics and real issues Americans and people face every day, diving into those has really made me interested in speaking out about politics and really diving into the why I believe what I believe as a Christian and as a conservative. So through that, I decided to start my own social media page about conservatism called Conservative Grace. And through that, I worked for about a year for Young Americans Against Socialism, advocating for why socialism is not the right choice and why young people shouldn't support it. And from there, I've done some work in political marketing and worked with Turning Point USA. But I'm so excited to now be working with the Institute for Faith and Freedom as a fellow. And I'm really excited to just dive into the core of faith and of freedom and how that relates to everything going on today. So I'm really excited about everything to come with this podcast. And over the summer, I was fortunate to work for Arsenal Media Group, where I did political marketing and consulting and did some influencer marketing. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come out of the podcast.
Yeah, and that was an internship position, correct, this past summer?
It was, yes. Yeah. So, I was working with them. It was full-time, so that was really great. And I learned a lot just about, the inside of conservative politics, what that looks like, and was able to, with my time at Arsenal, work with some pretty cool people, whether it be some congressmen, some other influencers in the conservative movement, and people that speak out pretty actively. So it was a really great experience for me as a student.
And then even on top of being involved with the Institute for Faith and Freedom here at Grove City, you are involved with a number of organizations, president, correct, of
Young Women for America, yeah.
There we go, yeah.
Yeah, so currently I serve as the president for Young Women for America here at Grove City College, and just got back from D.C. that we had a great leadership training for that. And also I serve as a Turning Point USA ambassador right now.
Yeah, Grace, you're perfectly tapped into multiple streams of the conservative movement, and I think you're perfect to fill in. And we already have had multiple conversations about topics that we believe in, and then give some pushback, maybe some areas, but we'll see throughout the year.
It'll be interesting. But and thank you so much. But Aaron, you've been up to so much this summer as well. You were in D.C. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so working in Washington, D.C. for an internship, and I worked for the Conservative Partnership Institute. It was a great opportunity, lots of networking, and almost more of the kind of TV or Hollywood intern position where it was filling fridges and setting up luncheons, but it was a lot of initiative. So taking that initiative in D.C. and met with so many great people, networking constantly throughout the summer, and just talking to really good Christians especially, actually. That was the number one thing. So I would say like the first month of working in D.C., I was kind of turned off to the place. The culture is a little bit almost pretty accurate to what the media almost states it, or what you hear growing up of like D.C. being a swamp and almost this culture of a college frat life. But I was so surprised after the first like month or two, once I got really tapped in to, okay, wow, there are really strong Christian circles. Even alumni that went to small conservative or small Christian schools, there's a ton of them in Washington, D.C., from either Hillsdale, Liberty, and then Grove City, too. And so plugging into those resources and alumni bases in D.C. was fantastic, and I definitely learned a little bit about how coalitions are built in D.C. and just the nuts and bolts of how they always like to say, how does the sausage made in D.C., right? And so there's this policy aspect that I want to get into. And hopefully we'll be going back to D.C. God has opened a lot of doors, and I feel very blessed to have some wonderful people either wanting to be a mentor or just being welcome and opening to meet myself in D.C. So it was a great experience, and CPI was a great organization to get plugged into. And for anyone that doesn't know this, that CPI has a Grove City alum, Rachel Bavard. She is the, I want to get this right, head policy director of CPI, and she used to TA for Dr. Paul Kengor. So how cool is that Grove City is getting tapped into D.C. and spreading thick roots?
Absolutely, and even from just being there, there are quite a few Grove City alumni that are involved in other conservative Christian organizations there. Annabelle Rutledge is in charge of Young Women for America, where I was just in D.C., and she ran the whole event. So
Very cool.
She's a graduate of Grove City 2017, so there certainly are a lot of conservative Christians in D.C. But I would ask you, after being there, so what are your thoughts on conservatism today and how prevalent Christianity is in that? Because you were just in the middle of D.C., with a lot of kind of seeing conservatism on the inside and seeing how things ran there. You mentioned that there was a pretty good community of Christians there, but how do you think those two things are going right now?
No, it's a great kind of almost phenomenon to think about, and I always get a little bit nerdy in my political science brain. It's like, okay, how can we study these people? But from my perspective and the groups that I got tapped into, these pretty strong Christian groups in Washington, D.C. that are working, the belief a lot of the times when you're working within policy or just working in D.C., whatever type of government work or think tank work, is that, okay, I am here to make a change, whether that's going to extend to personal interactions every day or my actual work, like what project are we going to work on. You can see it in a number of different ways. So even when these groups or a lot of people in D.C. are working on policy that doesn't have a lot to do at the base level with any type of faith, it informs every interaction they have in D.C. So it's really encouraging to see individuals who they just love on their neighbors, no matter they understand that it has been so politicized, Washington, D.C., that, okay, now you're either conservative or progressive, and that's a huge thing is that you don't use other terms. Like it's purely just you're either conservative or progressive. And so within those work camps, a lot of Christian individuals are just loving on their neighbor, even if they're progressive, and it almost taking the high ground or sort of speak, take the high ground in arguments or policy works, but it doesn't take away any of their grit or hard work that they'll put it to someone who is working on the opposite end of the spectrum too. But it's a solid work. Do you see it kind of in your experience too with how conservatism is kind of thought about in the public eye versus how people in D.C. handle what conservatism is?
Yeah, I think that that's a great point you were mentioning, too, that we are all called to love each other no matter what the political leaning may be. But, yeah, I would say in my experience, there certainly are plenty. It's a big tent, as we've talked about on this show before. It is a very big tent where there are conservatives that are Christian or not, religious or not. So I think that is a really important thing to understand. But one of the things that we agree upon here is that our faith is the reason that we're conservative, and they really do go together. So I think that focusing on that foundation is really important in ultimately breaking down what conservatism really is and the why behind that and the why behind a lot of the policies that we stand for. So I think it is a bit harder to fully, I guess, get behind that ideology without that. Yeah,
it's definitely hard. As you said, it's Big Tent, so it's hard to speak to every individual group of what conservatism is, but again, from my perspective and the people that I've talked to, that is the Christian-informed conservatism. And even myself, when I think about kind of, okay, what is conservatism? We're going to kind of get to the nails and the bolts down here throughout the coming weeks. But I always think about it is that conservatism has the best understanding of human nature. And so now my Christian understanding of human nature is that we're broken. And a lot of times that's going to lead to sin in all types of areas in your life. And the conservative understands that that's also in play, and that, okay, whether it's going to lead to abuse and power, then we're going to have limited government. And we're going to start with the people at the lowest level. And we're going to trust the communities and people at the lowest level then to make the decisions and almost be the arbitrator of their governance, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is an informing factor of the faith and conservatism that I think is like one of the strongest in my personal view, and then in a lot of people in DC, I know.
Yeah, and I would say in contrast to that, too, it's important to understand why the left has their stances or more progressive people have those stances. And as a lot of conservatives talk about and a lot of commentators today, and I know Dr. Paul Kengor has done a lot of work on this with Marxism, it's breaking down the fact that people on the left are not really understanding human nature, and they're trying to kind of defy that, because human nature is what it is, and people are broken. Whether you're kind of identifying that through a Christian lens or not, there's no question about human nature. But Marxism and Marxist policies aim to kind of ignore that and defy human nature, which is why they don't work. So understanding human nature is a really important part of, coming up with policies that work and understanding the right ways that we should go about things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. It gets hard, and I know Libby and I, and then hopefully we get to talk about this, is that, okay, now we think that 100%, but then, man, you have so many people our age or above, especially in DC, that is not the understanding of human nature. And, I mean, even if it's simple as human nature is inherently good or evil, aside from being sin and broken, how do we have then those next conversations? But aside from that kind of like deep philosophical issues and conversations, it's that conservatism, in our perspective, definitely is the best ideology that captures what human or mankind is and how we work inherently. So going forward, is there hope, Grace? Is there young people that are conservative that have this similar understanding of human nature and what conservatives are, and then also in your experience in DC, how are they working?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there definitely is hope, and that's something that we should all hold on to, especially when you're scrolling through the news. It looks very discouraging, and obviously we know on a lot of college campuses they're predominantly dominated by leftist students, and it's pretty rare to be a conservative on a typical university campus. So while there's hope, it's also naive to think that there aren't a lot of young people that support ideas on the left, and I think a really amazing opportunity we have as conservatives is to try to understand why that is and to try to reach our peers with the truth, because I think that a lot of our peers that support Marxism blatantly or support more leftist ideology don't truly understand what those policies would mean, because Marxist policies have failed every time they've been tried throughout history across the world. Communism killed over 100 million people. So then we ask, well, why do so many young college kids and millennials think that Marxism or socialism is a good idea? And we actually see this. We see blatant socialists that identify as socialists or democratic socialists running for positions, and they're getting a lot of support. So it's a real thing in American political discussion today, and it's very prevalent. So I think thinking about, well, why do so many young people think something that has such a record of failure is a good idea? And I think part of the reason is that they don't understand what these policies would really mean, what these ideologies are, their history of failure, and a lot of that's not their fault. The education system has suppressed that largely and tried to not teach kids the truth about socialism and about communism. So I think understanding that and figuring out, well, how can we as conservatives reach our peers with the truth about these issues and about those ideologies is going to be really important, and how can we explain to them why we really do just want the best for our country and the best for people as conservatives.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think speaking to our generation is that we've seen people get shut out of conversations because of any type of viewpoint that they hold. And so here on Liberty Mail, and definitely within the conservative movement, what we've been doing well, I think, is that we're not kind of shutting out or deeming one ideology as completely evil or inherently good. This is going to lead to horrible things, but it's okay. Invite those people who hold those beliefs to the table, to where we have these conversations, and eventually just sharpens each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's a classical liberal understanding of what college is supposed to be.
It is, and it's so true, and it's kind of sad to see the way that discussions now can't really be had because people just hear one trigger word of, or will say you're racist or this or that, and kind of will just call the other side evil without even trying to hear them out. That's a huge problem where now people aren't having conversations or discussions about important things in the way that they used to, where we all, on all sides, need to do a better job of saying, okay, this person that I disagree with probably isn't evil or trying to ruin the world. I think having that mentality and understanding that most people, for the most part, want the best, and having civil conversations about why certain policies are better than others and certain ideas are better than others is the way to really change people's minds and reach them.
And going throughout the rest of the semester and the year, we're going to have a fine line of, okay, what is in the news, what is happening currently in culture or politics, and then how do we apply that to, okay, these are conservative values, these are Christian values, this is why we believe it. This is going to be a discussion on episode 3 that, okay, you can understand why as conservatives we understand voting systems or any kind of which now. But it's going to lead on from there, and hopefully it can be a discussion where the viewer and listener can understand our point of view, understand where people are coming from, and as you said, it's not going to be this black and white right from the other side of, okay, no, you believe that because you're racist, X, Y, and Z. No, it's usually a multitude of factors, and yeah, our faith informs a ton of what we do here at Grove City.
Absolutely, and we'll also be breaking down these issues and talking about other perspectives and why maybe people that disagree with us think what they think, and trying to break down really the root of these issues. And we'll be talking about a lot of things. There's a lot going on in the news between things going on with abortion or things going on with transgenderism or other things like that. There's plenty of different things that are going on in our country right now that are really important to break down and examine. Yeah,
and that's the biggest thing. So like Grace said, big topics, and honesty is going to be the best way of or avenue here of having these open conversations. And so we thank you for tuning in to the first episode of Liberty Mail. It's very exciting to have you here, Grace, and we are very excited just moving forward, changing it up a little bit, bringing you some wins of the week, maybe every once in a while, but then mostly just having really honest conversations about what we believe in and why we believe it. So if you're new here, please click the like or subscribe. There's a bell on YouTube. Spotify, please give it a follow too, subscribe. And thank you for tuning in to Liberty Mail. We will be back next week.
For more information on the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.